Okay, so here we are at the end of movement for the Anglo-Allies in turn 4. Remember, there are 10 turns in this battle. Okay, so let's take a look and work our way, as is traditional, from left to right from the point of view of the French commander. We can see that de la Tour's cavalry down here has decided to break, well, half of it has decided to break cover. The other half couldn't quite do it, gummed up too much in the forest and the streams and all that sort of thing. So these chaps have popped out here, and you can't recover from disorder in the forest, but you can out. So that's what they've done there. Now they've done that. They're just peeping out the edge of the forest, and they've put themselves into a position where if those chaps were to charge them, they're on the other side of a stream. These chaps can't charge them because they are, in fact, out of command. Because old Dubourg is down here, which is too jolly well far away. So they can change facing, but they cannot charge the enemy. Okay. Let's see. The Prussians down here, belonging to Anhalt-Dessau, there's not much of them left, but they've continued to press southward here, creeping up on the flank. They're not there yet, but they could potentially creep up on the flank of that artillery there, belonging to de Soffry. And then we've got the artillery here has simply turned itself so that they can give some short-range fire to there. They are permanently disordered, but they are short-range fire. Then we've got Scholten, what's the word I'm looking for? Significant move. These chaps, Scholten's forces were here, and then these chaps took themselves over this stream which leads to, doesn't have a name on the map, no, on the Volley and Bayonet map, that leads to the Nebelbach, over there, over to here, so that they can actually do a very, very small amount of musket fire at the cavalry there of Dubourg. Okay, they are now under the command of the direct command of Eugene, who's over there. Here we go. And then it's all happening over here, because we've got here we have the forces of let's see, well, it's a chap called Maximilian. I don't know what his full title is, not to be confused with the Elector, of course, who's on the other side. And he's got his cavalry, and they've crossed the stream here. They're honing in on the French left flank. Also belonging to him, are Fugger's, the lobster-potted cuirassier here, which came in very handy in the occasion of the actual battle itself. They've got to make sure they stay within the command radius there of Maximilian and so forth. These chaps have moved over slightly to the west to try to keep out of the rear of these forces, to try to avoid becoming entangled with them. These chaps, Scholten, they've moved forward to pour some musketry into Dubourg's infantry there, try to finally cause some significant casualties on Dubourg, and they can also be fired on by these chaps. Desultory fire will come from the village here at them. The artillery is pivoted here. They're going to be able to fire on them as well. Then in a bold move, we'll see how sensible this was, Ostfriese's cavalry, which belongs to the excuse me, they're under the command of is it Marlborough or Charles Churchill, something like that. Anyway, and they've crossed the stream, they've crossed the Nebelbach, and they're basically sort of trying to seize the gap here. They are faced by a significant number of French cavalry. Are they all actually French? No, there's got Bavarians here. Those are the only Bavarians involved up this way at the moment. And so there's a lot facing them. We shall see what happens there. Let's see what else happened. Horn's troops that were sort of gumming things up here, they've moved over here. We don't want more punishment coming to them, at least not for the time being. These chaps here sorted themselves out, smartened themselves up. They recovered from disorder, in other words. I'm just trying to paint a pretty picture. And then let's see what else happened. Yes, a lot of action going on down here. We've got Inglesby and, of course, chiefly Cuts finally getting into action. They have decided to... it's time to act. So they've decided to try their luck at crossing the Nebelbach, and all of them were able to do it without becoming disordered. Special scenario rule, you only become disordered on a roll of 1 or 2, except for that unit there. They became disordered. Okay, so they're pressing forward. They have held back. They've made sure that they're not within close range of the enemy's artillery. They're still at least 400 yards away. So they've crossed over. Of course, these chaps down here have still got another branch of the Nebelbach down here to cross over. And then, by use of manhandling, Colonel Blood's artillery moved forward, has crossed the Nebelbach down here, and has Blenheim itself within close range. They are only field artillery, they're not heavy artillery, so that means that the people in here in the stone town are going to get saving throws. But when they become stationary next turn, that will, of course, significantly affect that. Let's see. So, yes, some interesting moves have taken place. This is probably a bit of a gamble here in the center. It's going to be difficult for the French Bavarians to sort of put an overwhelming number of cavalry against them because of the constricted space here. We've got the village on the one hand, and we've got the marsh here. So, well, as usual, we shall see. So now it's on to what is it? On to we also did the rallying. That's right, the rallying down here. Of course, you only do the current phasing players rallying. It's on a mutual phase, so for both players. So yeah, down here we had Charles Churchill rally those chaps who I believe belong to Inglesby. So they've rallied, and yes, the other troops that had rallied that were over here that Churchill rallied in the previous turn have marched smartly down to here. Okay. Well, there was actually surprisingly little... there were surprisingly few areas where there was actually combat taking place because the Anglo-Allies had kept themselves well back from the close range of the enemy's artillery, which meant, of course, that the enemy therefore couldn't fire at them in their turn. But so there wasn't a lot of combat going on, but there was a crucial morale test that took place down here with Dubourg's cavalry, which had to test because they were in close range of the artillery here, and they failed their morale test. So they routed off the table that way. And that meant that then Dubourg only had one hit left that they could sustain before becoming exhausted. And sure enough, they were hit here. The unit was eliminated, so Dubourg is now an exhausted division. We've marked there with the old red stuff here. Yes, so old Marcin's getting hit pretty hard over there. So that's what happened there. That was pretty significant. And that was about it actually, because there are some subtle rules involved in towns and buildings and stone buildings and all this sort of thing. And one thing is that fire from artillery is never treated as being close range under any circumstances. So therefore, not only did the town not have to test for these chaps being within close range, but also the fact that they're in close range makes no difference. So they're firing effectively at long range, and of course they're field artillery, so that means they get a saving throw as well. So plink, plink, various things bounced off the walls and not much happened down there. Yeah, so the big news then is that Dubourg is now an exhausted division. So that changes quite a lot of things. And so in terms of, poor old Massin, I mean, what's he got left? Because remember, if the Allies can exhaust all the divisions of either Massin or Tala, they have won. Well, what has Massin got left which is not exhausted? Well, Maffei, remember, which has been who's been in a lot of combat. His chaps, these chaps here, for example, these chaps here, they're Maffei, aren't they? Yes, they are. Okay. He is one hit away from becoming exhausted. So surely that's going to happen any moment now. And then beyond that then, Massin has still got the cavalry division of Darco. And he's also got the mixed division, which has got infantry, cavalry, and artillery of de Soffry. So that's down here. So there's de Soffry's cavalry is there. See, they've taken one hit. There's the artillery there. And there's 2 units of infantry inside, what is that, Lutzingen. And as far as the cavalry division goes, you've got these 3 units of Darco here. They're in good shape, ready to pounce on the Anglo-Allies. But of course, the question is, there's also these 2 units down here who have been routed. That's right, yes, these are unrallied. They can be rallied on the next turn if Massin goes over there to rally them. But these, of course, need to be used with caution because, yes, it might be sort of like, oh, well, let's have everybody with some help from their chums over here. Let's all pounce on Oostfries down here. Let's do that. Why not? Well, of course, the cautionary thing is that Massin is of course keeping a close eye on now those divisions that he's got left which are not actually exhausted. Darco in 5 more hits would become exhausted, and if they became exhausted and Maffei is only 1 hit away, then all he's basically got left of substance is de Soffry down here, which is a sort of like, a sort of an odd mix of cavalry and artillery. And, of course, this was only the 4th turn for the Anglo-Allies. So, yes, he's going to have to think very carefully before he throws them into the fray. Yes, so it's interesting stuff. One small aside there I didn't mention. Yes, of course, Dubourg took a lot of hits there. He took 4 hits, and there was a role, of course, for morale collapse, and his morale did not collapse. So now we're moving on to the French turn 4. Righto, here we are, French turn 4, and as we can see, the French have decided to shorten their line. Well, they've rearranged things a bit anyway, try and get things in order. Yes, things are starting to get a bit slippery in a lot of different places, which of course is entirely appropriate, what with all these streams around and everything, and marsh, tends to be a bit slippery. But yes, so if we go down here, not much in the way of sort of raging combat. No, not really. But old du Soffry decided that he could spare one of the units in Lutzingen down here, and they've sent themselves off into the Goldberg, into the forest, so they can take a pot at, because word is that there are some Prussians lurking around in there, but they've got long faces, you see. That is to say, they're permanently disordered. So the de Soffry's chaps thought that they'd waltz in there and take a pot at them. They've got a pretty beefy unit. It's 4 strength points, which is pretty beefy as things go in this battle. But they haven't got particularly good morale. So anyway, the idea was send them in there. De Soffry can, excuse me, he's completely unscratched, so he can take a few hits. And of course, the Prussians are permanently disordered. So anyway, they've lined themselves up and they're going to take a pot at them. Not going to get a lot of results out of that, of course, because they're firing back and forth in a forest where there is, of course, a saving throw against fire. But the idea is to try and take care of them so that see them off, that sort of thing. Because otherwise they're lurking around, and I don't want the threat of them interfering with the artillery and all that sort of thing. Artillery spun itself around a bit to point at the lurking enemy and all that sort of thing. These chaps have positioned themselves so that the Imperial cavalry up here can't charge smartly across the stream and hit the artillery, because they're in the way. Their zone of control would impede that. Here, there's been a sort of let's see. These chaps were on the other side of the stream, very much in danger of being fired on by them, charged by them. So they've just withdrawn Dubourg's cavalry here. These chaps have remained in situ to face the enemy. These chaps have bent themselves around in a sort of a flank thing there to be able to face the enemy, which might come this way. That's a contour marker there. That's not marsh, so they could come straight over here without setting foot in the marsh. So got to keep an eye on that. Okay, and then we've got some Maffei's troops. The idea is to try to keep Maffei's troops out of immediate fire, as it were. They're going to have to get involved in the end, and they're going to lose a casualty eventually, and of course the division will become exhausted. We know that's going to happen eventually. Oh well, what are you going to do? Right, then just working our way slowly eastward. What have we got? These chaps were rallied, of course, at Dacaux cavalry. They were rallied by Massin, who came over and did that last turn. So they moved forward. They moved over the stream. Okay, the what is it? The Maulmeyer, and oh no, that's the Maulmeyer, isn't it? Yes. Does that stream down south even have a name on this map? It does indeed. It's the Brunnerbach. Right, that's right. So they squelched over the Brunnerbach. All right, and then Massin is down here rallying the other one of Dacaux's cavalry. The rest of Dacaux's cavalry have moved westward and lined themselves up. All this cavalry here is on the northern side of the stream. They're not using the stream, the Maulmeyer, to protect themselves against the enemy. They want to be ready to move against the enemy without delay. That does mean that they've exposed themselves slightly. Well, they're far more exposed than they would be if they were on the other side of the stream. So these plucky chaps down here belonging to Oostfries, they could charge them next turn. We know that. So they got themselves all nicely lined up, and the idea, the sort of driving idea there, was to try to get Suerlauben in position, because he's got morale 6 chaps. Because of course, if they charge the enemy, or if they're in combat with the enemy, they do count as because they are firearm tactics cavalry. They're all firearm tactics, and they will count a -1 on the morale test because they're firearm tactics and they're not. Effectively, they count as being lighter weight cavalry than whoever they're facing if the enemy is not firearm tactic. So it's a -1. So that's a nasty one to have to chew on. So we're going in with what have we got? Zurlauben. So well, they've got a morale of 6, so they've got a good fighting chance against them. These chaps over here have got a morale of 5, Dumier, and indeed Tallard has joined this unit here to try and beef it up, because he's the army commander and all that sort of thing. Right. And then here, basically, the Tallard decided to abandon his forward position. So his men have retreated or withdrawn in a somewhat orderly manner south of the Maulmeyer. That's right. And in so they've had to make a disordered move where they changed facing, became disordered by so doing. We've seen this before. Pulled themselves onto the other side of the stream. These chaps here, belonging to Maulmeyer, were able to push themselves into position up against the stream. These chaps, once they sort themselves out, they will be right up against the stream, so that means they're in a pretty good defensive position. None of them are permanently disordered or belong to an exhausted division, so they will be able to become stationary. They've just given ground, essentially, and they pulled back the artillery and the whole thing, etc., etc. Right, so let's see, what do we got? I think, now that I think about it, no, that's okay. I thought I'd made a mistake there, but I think I'm all right. Let's see, Blenheim is still garrisoned by those chaps. I don't think there's anything else really happening down there. Massan's over here rallying those chaps as mentioned. Yes, so it's there's going to be very little, just a little desultory fire. There's going to be no melee, and we'll see what happens. So let's resolve that. And here we are at the end of French turn 4. So there were, in fact, no required morale tests. And then we had our combat. There was only one hit scored, and that was a hit on Scholten's chaps over here. They took a hit. So now Scholten's division has lost 3 hits. They can lose, if they lose 3 more, they become exhausted. So they're halfway towards exhaustion, so to speak. Yes. And well, that's it. So there we are at the end of the French fourth turn, and well, on to the Anglo-Allies. Okay, so here we are. It's Anglo-Allied turn 5 at the end of movement. And what have we got? Well, let's see. Let's start off down here on the French left as usual. These chaps have remained in position. There's not much else they can do to contribute to the battle. So they've remained in position to hold up the French there. And then finally, Delatour's cavalry has come out of the woods, the Goldberg Forest. They've come out and stopped, and of course, being firearm cavalry, it's only 1 die, but they can fire at the enemy cavalry here. Their brothers in arms here from Delatour have charged across the Nebelbach. They weren't defending the other side, they were considerably further back, so no disorder there, so they have charged into them. So here, it's they're both firearm trained, so it's not like when you've got like the British cavalry or the Dutch and Danish cavalry charging. These are imperial forces, so they're firearm trained, so there's no inherent disadvantage to the French. They're pretty much even there because nobody's disordered or anything like that. That's right, and they're both the same weight. They're both light. These chaps here belonging to Scholten have crossed the Nebelbach, and they're just about able to bring the French here into musket range. They're doing it, they're brave fellows, because they're going to get it on the chin from Maffei's heavy artillery here, which has got them in close range. So they're going to get a blast of canister from the artillery there. But the idea is they've got to get their teeth into de Saulfry's forces, because if they can exhaust de Saulfry, and the other big one, of course, is Darcot, which we'll see about in a moment. Then that would mean that they could wrap up the whole business of exhausting Massin's army, at which point they've won the battle. Right, over here, not a lot going on there. These chaps decided it was too dangerous to come down here and get involved here. They'd get shot to pieces, basically. So they've gone stationary, those chaps belonging to Scholten there. As have their comrades from Scholten's division, who are just sitting in Oberglau, keeping their heads down, and possibly having a light lunch. Then big development, because one of the things that had to be done to realize the plan that I just mentioned to you of defeating Massan's army is, of course, to exhaust Darko's division. And Darko's division, of course, we've got these 2 units here which are permanently disordered, and we've got these 3 nice shiny ones here at the end of the great big French cavalry line. And so in a bold stroke, Oostfries, with his, who's he got? He's got Dutch and Imperial forces, and they were up here, having just crossed the Nebelbach, and they decide, well, actually they were more sort of here-ish, and of course they can charge through a village, no trouble. So they went straight down here. They've got this sort of odd formation they've got going here, but they've come straight down here, and they've smashed into Darko. Now, the forces of Darko are going to be at a disadvantage because they're going to count as a lighter cavalry weight because they are firearm trained, and the chaps charging into them are not. They're charging in with the saber sort of chaps, and so we'll see what happens there. Right. Then to sort of take up the gap that was formed here, we've got cavalry from Eugene has moved forward. We've got Imperial and Austrian cavalry have moved forward, just crossed over the Nebelbach. And then we've got British and what are they? British. Yeah, they're who are they? They're Lumley. That's right. Have also just crossed over the stream, and these chaps here have been joined on the end. Actually joined by His Grace the Duke himself. Okay, he's put himself into the battle line, much as he did at Blenheim. Yes, very risking life and limb all over the place he was. Now, the wily Anglo-Allied commanders have tried to do the best job they can of spacing the forces out, because, of course, we used to have all of Orkney's division was hinged here on the or secured here on their left flank here at Unterglau, and his chaps, his foot, were all along here. And the idea is that they've been taken out of there and pushed over there, basically, because otherwise they were right behind Lumley's men here. And if the French had said, "Ooh, look, there's a tempting target," and had charged Lumley and had defeated him, then those forces would have got immediately all mixed up with Orkney's forces there, and potentially disordering them, or potentially worse, probably, as far as I know. Anyway, so they've been just swept over there. As far as getting them out of the way could be done, there's still possibilities here. There are possibilities that if these cavalry survive, for example, they could charge Lumley, and that would still point them in the direction then of Orkney's forces. Okay, we do what we can. We work with what we've got, as they say. Because, they're very slow moving, of course, because although they were still north of the Nebelbach, they didn't have to cross the stream. It takes them half a turn to change facing, so because they're poorly trained. And that makes a huge difference, of course. It makes it also a fascinating tactical puzzle when you're fighting a battle from this period. Down here, then, we had the cavalry under... oh, gosh, what's his name? Let's see. Yes. I think it's Württemberg Neuenstadt. So, yes, they're the ones who are exhausted division, not morale collapsed. But so they've just sort of lined themselves up, sort themselves out a bit, smarten themselves up, but they're staying back, making sure that they've stayed back 1,200 yards from these chaps, because if those chaps were to rout, then these chaps want to make sure they're not within the first half of their rout move. So they're very much back there. Of course, they can't charge people because they are an exhausted division, but they can certainly get in the way of the enemy if we can use them wisely. Then down here, a lot of tactical thought went into, should the infantry now press their attack? Decision was made, not just yet. Let's hang on for another turn, see what develops, because if they had moved forward, they didn't have enough, they weren't close enough to be able to throw caution to the wind and charge, disordering themselves across the Maulmeyer down here, which would have been a bad move anyway. Not so bad against the disordered units, but anyway, they were too far away in general. So they would have had to, what they could have done is if they'd moved forward, some of them were already across the stream, so if they'd moved forward, they could have sort of moved forward to about sort of here-ish, but then they would have been in that delicate situation of being infantry, which is not stationary, but is in the open with enemy cavalry very much nearby. And they didn't like the sound of that, so they decided to hold back for the time being and go stationary, see what happens with the cavalry situation down here. Some of them reformed from disorder. Some of them moved forward slightly to at least get their feet across the stream. Let's see. I think there was a situation down here where that was not done, because if it had been done, it would have put the forces within close range of the enemy's artillery here, so they didn't want to do that. Down here, a delicate move took place, which is where Cut's infantry... Which particular unit is that? Let's see if I can read that upside down. Oh, yeah, it's Rose. Yes. Infantry who have been sort of milling around down there, as we've discussed before, possibly, having a leisurely lunch, that sort of thing. They've decided finally to move themselves forward so as to provide a screen, because you cannot shoot through the enemy, and they're screening the artillery. And what I've done is I've dumped some sort of shrubbery on top of the artillery to remind me that they are in fact limbered. They've limbered up. We've got a problem with the artillery down there because they're south of the stream. So of course what I wanted to do was move them north of the stream and have them move this way, because here they're just plinking away at this town and not causing hardly any damage at all. Even if they were stationary, it would be terrible odds. So the idea was, all right, well, let's limber them up. It's going to take a while to get them in position and move them into a position sort of here-ish, unlimber. Don't bother crossing the stream, or might cross it in the future. But at least from here, you can have a long-range shot at some flesh rather than stone down here. Okay, but the problem is it takes half a turn to limber, of course, and it... Yes, it takes half a turn to limber, but it takes half a turn to cross the stream. So they couldn't do it in one go. So that meant they would have limbered up. And then, of course, if you're limbered artillery, you are ultimately vulnerable to melee, because if anyone makes contact with you, you're instantly destroyed. So, for example, the French forces in here could have sallied forth. They could have charged the artillery, and if they'd lined themselves up right, they could have hit all 3 units of them and eliminated all 3 units in one charge, which wouldn't have been very funny. So the idea was they needed some sort of protection, so therefore that unit of Cuts has stuck itself out in front. So they're limbered, and then on the next turn they could go back north across the stream, or if they had some sort of screening cover down here, they could indeed go west along here and just sort of wheel themselves up to here and start blasting away there, as long as they were protected from being charged. Right, whilst limbered. What else? Not much else happened. Let's see. Forces of, who was that? Horn. They just continued moving in a northeasterly direction, just to sort of get themselves out of the way. They were here milling around. Let's see. And then we've got Ingoldsby's troops, which are 1, 2, 3, 4 here. They're in pretty bad shape, although, well, 2 of their units, as we can see, don't have a scratch on them. But they're definitely sort of second-line forces now. We don't want them to be front-line forces. So they were kept sort of over here so that hopefully not to get tangled up with any cavalry action there. Right. And that's it. So now it's on to... there's no rallying. No. Right, so it's on to morale and combat. Yes. All right, so here we are at the end of Anglo-Allied turn number 5. And let's see what has come to pass. Well, there was some desultory fire here, and indeed the Prussians got the better of the French there, because they scored a casualty on de Soffry's infantry for no loss to themselves. So plucky chaps, the Prussians there. Here we had de Soffry's de Dreux cavalry were able to see off the cavalry of de la Tour, which were, what are they? They're imperial, aren't they? Yeah. So shoved them, sent them retreating down this way. They took a hit. They took a hit as well. It was, if I remember correctly, it was a melee tie, yes. So they've taken 2 hits now, and old de la Tour's cavalry has taken 1. They're back there disordered, of course, stuck down there in the Goldberg, the forest. Let's see, of course, there wasn't much going on here. No, there was, that's right. Close range artillery fire on the infantry of Schalten that went down here to be able to fire at de Vries' cavalry was shot to pieces by Maffei's heavy artillery here. So that's where they were, and they are gone. Right. Now, the main event, of course, was in the centre with the 3 units of Anglo-Allied cavalry under Oostfries, the Dutch horsemen who had come right through this lot and charged the cavalry of Darcot down here at the end of the left end of the French cavalry line in the centre here, and got off to a bad start because the morale tests were done hither and thither, and the only unit to fail their morale test was this unit here. So they started off the melee disordered, which is not a good place to come from, obviously. However, plucky chaps as they were, as it turned out, they managed to win their melee. So they saw these chaps off. They both took 1 hit, okay, and forced these chaps under, yes, I'm getting out a magnifying glass, under von Weichel, forced them to retreat. So they took a hit and retreated. Same thing happened here with the chaps of... who is that? Wolframsdorf. Let's see. Unit Wolframsdorf 1, as I'm calling it, because he's got 2 units. So they were, success there, but unfortunately no casualties. Unfortunately, from the Allied point of view, obviously. Yes. And then we have these chaps on the end who might they be? I suppose I can magnify with that, can't I? Yeah, of course I can. De Lejal, I'll call them. They won their melee and forced the chaps of Oostfries' cavalry to shoot all the way back north of the Nebelbach. It was a retreat, of course, so they didn't pass through any friends in the first half of the move, so those chaps are fine. And there they are back there, having taken 2 hits. They are indeed out of command now, which is rather inconvenient for them, but there we are. And then, of course, elsewhere, there was, let's see, the commander, who was it down here? Cutts, commanding these troops down here, Rose unit, decided not to open fire on them because the odds were not very attractive. So they didn't fire on the chaps in Blenheim, which meant that the chaps in Blenheim couldn't fire back. Right. And that is that. That is the end of turn number 5. Now, what has... I should mention then, so let's take a look at... I'll just take a look at divisions which are very close to exhaustion. Let's give you a quick update on that. So we have Schalten under Eugene. So that's these 2 units left now. They're in 2 hits they would become exhausted. So they're very close to exhaustion. Okay. And then as far as Talar goes, no change there. It's the same situation as before. De Clermont, his forces down here are 2 hits away from exhaustion. And then, let's see, we've got, because things have changed. Let's see here. Darcot, the very big cavalry brigade with 5 units, 5 brigades in it. Darko is 3 hits away from exhaustion. So Darko is, of course, here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's 3 hits away from exhaustion. So if the Allies could exhaust him, that would be a very big task accomplished. And then finally, well, it's not that close. It's still 3 hits. Well, 3 hits away. Okay, we'll mention it. De Soffry, which these chaps down here, they're 3 hits away from exhaustion. So, yes, the Allies are definitely getting close to be able to pull off defeating Marsin, that is to say, the army, Marsin's army, which are, of course, the forces on the western side of the battlefield. They are getting close to being able to do that. Of course, they have to make sure that in so doing they don't lose so many men themselves that they end up with 10 of their own divisions exhausted. Or, as we know, if they have a collapsed division, that counts as 2. And at the moment, on that count, it's basically 5 because they've got 2 collapsed divisions and 1 exhausted. So, yes, they're only halfway towards that. But yes, so they can with how many? Let's just put it this way: how many hits would they have to get on Massin to completely exhaust him? You got Darko is 3, Maffei is 1, de Soffry is 3, and the artillery is 1. So that's 8. In 8 more hits in the right place, they will win the battle because they can. If all of those, if all of those were on the right units in Marsin, there's Marsin down here doing a bit of rallying. Marsin's army, then they will have won the battle. So there's, that was the 5th turn. There's still 5 more turns, so there's certainly plenty of time to do it. So it absolutely could happen. Right, so let's press on now and get on to the French 5th turn. And here we are at the end of the movement of turn 5 for the French Bavarians. Right, we're getting ready for some action. Let's see, over here on the French left, chaps here have decided to just continue the desultory fire there. Too risky for Soffry to start charging about and taking casualties, even though the enemy is very weak. There's no point really in forcing the issue there because we don't want more casualties to du Soffry. Then, let's see, these chaps have lined themselves up to take a blast away at, who was that, Delatour's cavalry, and de Soffry's infantry, who was that, Montbron, have moved out of good old, Lutzingen, in order to pour some volley fire into the jolly old Imperial cavalry there, who have been charged by de Soffry as chaps here, de Dreux. They've charged in, and so everybody's ganging up there, trying to cause some casualties on Delatour's division. Let's see, Maffei's 2 units here, which were standing here, stationary facing north. We're really not defending anything anymore, so the idea was to pop them up here where they're not stationary, but they are immediately on the other side of a stream, so it means if they were charged by the cavalry would be disordered. Risky business because Maffei has only got whatever it is, one more hit. It's bound to happen though, that they will become exhausted, but it was too much to just leave that section of the line completely undefended. It would have meant that the next turn these 2 units would have been able to charge here, for example. So it was seen as something that had to be done. These units here have moved themselves slightly this one's rotated, and they've moved themselves slightly to put themselves in a position to blast away at Schalten's division there. Crucial division, if they can score some casualties there. Then also a lot of exciting stuff going on in the centre. So we had, let's see, these chaps are sort of struggling, slowly coming back up to the front line to just sort of get in the way, because of course they are permanently. Oh no, they can attack. That's right. They're not. They don't belong to an exhausted division. So although they're permanently disordered, they can attack certainly, and there are indeed attacks going on. The geometry of the situation didn't work in the favor of the French. Well, not entirely, because in order for this unit, which is disordered, to go up there and hit them in the flanks, and they're hitting them in the front, I also wanted to charge them, so they've gone and charged them there, but unfortunately it was just the way it worked out. There isn't enough room to be able to get them in there to charge as well, even though they're disordered. There, of course, it just adds a bit of oomph to the situation, but they couldn't fit through the gap. So there we've basically got a sort of, it's almost a one-on-one, except it's less than that, because they're a disadvantage, of course, in the morale test, because they count as lightweight cavalry, because they've got the firearm training. But here, these chaps are being definitely hit in the flank. They're disordered, yes, but they're disordered as well. So, there's a good chance that they might fail their morale test and rout, and we're going to do that one first. And, of course, if they rout through them, then they will certainly disorder them, and that will mean that they will then be disordered before we get into the melee here. So the careful sequencing of who does what in the melee. And here we had a lot of sort of shuffling and tidying up. There were a lot of units, of course, that had just crossed south of the Maulmeyer, which needed to be reformed from being disordered, turn around, face the enemy. They're well positioned. They're immediately on the other side of the stream. The artillery has deployed. Nobody's stationary yet, but they're all lined up and forming a good defensive position. These chaps here were able to go stationary, Clermont. And then we've got these units here belonging to Saint-Pierre. They were basically, there wasn't room for them to deploy, so they were basically, they reformed from disorder. They moved forward. They didn't have enough move left to turn around and face the enemy, but they've just moved back far enough that were these chaps forced to retreat, not rout, but retreat, they wouldn't encounter these chaps in the first half of their move and mess them up. And then we had some miscellaneous troops belonging to Clermont here, the smaller unit of skirmishing light cavalry, and then also some infantry. They wouldn't fit, so basically they were shoved back here to get them out of the way. Right, and that's what's gone on there. So now we're off to morale tests and combat. Right, we're at the end of the French Bavarian fifth turn, and while I can keep these facts in my head, we've got several divisions are now one casualty away from exhaustion. I'll tell you what happened in a moment, but so the key thing to think about then is we've already established Maffei is down there. He's one away from exhaustion. Now Darco, the cavalry, they are one away from exhaustion. And also Oostfriese's cavalry, which is sort of back here and back there and over here, they are one away from exhaustion. And Scholten, which is here and here, they are one away from exhaustion. So, right. So what happened? Desultory fire down here. Nothing happened. In the cavalry melee down there, who is it? Delatour's chaps were, they were seen off back to here. And, no, wait a minute. Oh, gosh. Yeah. It's just a question of trying to remember the sequence that took place. But there was a unit of Delatour, that's right, who they had to retreat from. They were over here. They had to retreat, and they, I think they were sent up there on the previous turn, possibly. Yeah. Anyway, so they had to retreat that way. They retreated off the edge of the world, so they were lost. So Delatour's division is indeed exhausted. Okay, so that means that whereas before the French Bavarians had a total of sort of 5 points out of 10 on the exhaustion list, they've now got 6 points out of 10 that they've achieved. So they've got 4 more to go. All right, to be able to achieve a victory by that by those criteria. Right. Then over up in this neck of the woods, a hit was scored on these chaps, which means, as I say, Sholton is now only one hit away from exhaustion. Of course, the main event was the cavalry melees that took place here. Bit of a kerfuffle down there because the morale tests were done, and there were two units. There was one unit on their side and one unit on the French side that were disordered, and they both failed their morale tests, so they both routed. You've got these chaps routed down to here, Oostfries, and then these chaps of Darko routed down to here. Okay. Let's see. Somebody routed. They retreated. That's right. These chaps retreated through the artillery and disordered them. But Oostfries took hits. Darko took hits. And then we ended up with this unit of Oostfries here, who smartly, in a very parade ground style, have turned their backs on the enemy. And that's because they know that now in their turn, nothing can happen until their turn, which is coming right up. And they'll trot smartly back that way, probably. I think that's the general idea. Because as often happens when you're playing Volley and Bayonet, if a division is getting dangerously close to exhaustion, often the best thing to do is to pull it back from the action, especially if you've got something else that you can throw in there instead. Right. So yes, very much. Both sides have everything to play for. Both armies have everything to play for. It's very much knife edge type stuff here. And I'm definitely thinking that, let's see, this was the end of turn 5. So you got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You got 5 turns left. And I would not be at all surprised if we saw a victory some considerable time before turn 10. Maybe turn 8 or something like that. So we shall see. But I think it's a marvelous tactical puzzle. This is it's a absolute pleasure to play this battle using V&B, and I'm enjoying the heck out of it. And having said that, we move on to Anglo-Allied turn 6. Right, here we are at the end of movement in Anglo-Allied turn 6, and as usual, some interesting developments. Okay. We'll start off down here. Nothing there. Delatour has gone off to find his chaps. These chaps here belonging to the confusingly named Maximilian, who's on the Anglo-Allied side, as well as being the Elector of Bavaria down this way. Let's see. These chaps are just in a standoff against the forces of Maffei here, who are, of course, nicely lined up on the other side of the stream. Which they would be disordered if they charged them. These chaps have shuffled about a bit, and now they just changed their. What did they do? They changed their facing, and then they've been joined by Fugger with his cuirassier with the lobster pots. You see, and they've just crossed the stream. Finally, they're all together now. Maximilian's troops there. Okay, there's Eugene still keeping an eye on things. Now we have big development down here. Scholten has abandoned Oberglau and instead has moved across the stream, and both of Scholten's remaining infantry units are now here, poised to cross the stream to start heading west to try and finally deal with Maffei and cause one more casualty on Maffei to exhaust his division. These sort of straggling cavalry down here belonging to, who is that? Let's see. Wettenberg-Neuenstadt. Exhausted division, yes, but they brought themselves forward. The main thing that had to happen there was we had to get somebody in front of that artillery unit there, which can't move because it's pre-professional, and we didn't want these infantry surging ahead and charging it to try and bag that, because, of course, that... so near as I can remember these things, that would have counted as a division in this scenario, the way it's set up. Let's see here. Yes, army assets. Yes, this actually belongs to Eugene. Yes, but it would. Right, so we can't have that. Very vulnerable and very powerful. Powerful but vulnerable. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay. Right, so they're sort of milling around in there trying to stop that from happening. The big thing that's happened is yet another cavalry charge. It was decided Ostfriese's cavalry, most of it's up here, of course, up that way. But sorry, bad camera work. But Ostfriese's cavalry was going to go and join its friends. Instead, they decided, no, it's time to finish the job, because they had an opportunity to charge Darko's cavalry here, which was not in contact with the what's it called? Maulmeyer, is it? Yes. And so they had the chance to charge over the stream, hit them while they are disordered. So they thought, because the thing is, if they can get one more casualty on Darko, then Darko is finally exhausted. So it looked like it had to be the thing to do. Now, if they had gone in alone, that would have meant that then they probably would have been eliminated by forces coming here from Zurlauben. So it was decided to back them up, sort of a in for a penny, in for a pound sort of a maneuver, but they do have the tactical edge. The nice thing that they were able to do here was they were able to say, okay, we're going to have 2 units pick on the end unit here. So you've got both these units of, Württemberg Tech. Both of those units are hitting here Zurlauben Brolier. So he's outnumbered 2-1, basically. We also have the fact that even though these are all firearm trained cavalry, so firearm cavalry here on the Anglo-Allied side, they still have the edge because they have a edge in the morale test in the sense that they are heavy and they are medium, so they still outclass them. On the other hand, Zurlauben's Brolier's unit is a morale of 6, and these two chaps have a morale of 5. So I suppose that would mean in the morale test, they will indeed be even. Right, this chap, there just wasn't room to have a go at the gendarmerie, the sort of rather self-important chaps there. And so they were missed out, and instead we got these chaps here from, that's Lumley, I think, finally getting into it. Lumley Woods, Woods' brigade under Lumley, and they have thrown themselves against Dumier. And who is that? Let's zoom in on that one. Can we do that? Let's see. Yeah. Silly Grignan, or something like that. Right, so they're having to go at them, and they will have the advantage. Let's see, morale of 6, can't fail their morale test because there are no other factors applying. And these chaps here are going to be marked down for being hit by a heavier weight of cavalry because they're firearm trained and they're not. These chaps on the end have been left alone. That was decided. The rest of Lumley's cavalry, which was here, could have charged over here, but it was decided not to do that tactically because they would have been plastered by short-range fire from these chaps here. Okay, so instead, they decided to face themselves west, because remember, in Volley and Bayonet, the absolute position of the unit is the front. Is the center of the front edge of the unit. So that's there, in other words. So they've crossed the stream. That's where they are in terms of calculating that, as it were. So they're heading west. They're on the south bank of the Nebelbach, and the idea is to threaten these chaps over here. Okay. Let's see what else. Yeah, we had Orkney, who'd sort of shoved off over here to get out of the way of possible cavalry retreating back over the Nebelbach, have now come back, but they've positioned themselves so that even if these forces rout they're far enough back that they won't get mixed in with them. And let's see, we've had Inglesby's troops have moved forward a little bit to get into this sort of a position here. Then we've got all the way down here, nothing happened with the infantry. They've still decided the time is not right. They don't want to start waltzing across the battlefield until they're fairly sure that the French cavalry up here has been dealt with, basically. Also, they are cramped because they've got 2 units of artillery here who are about to go stationary. We've got one here which is already stationary. So there's a huge sort of killing ground here. So they've got the only place they're really safe is in the middle there, or safer. And then, the breaking news down the end here on the eastern end of the battlefield was that Colonel Blood's artillery, which of course limbered up on the south of the Nebelbach last turn, has now crossed the Nebelbach and is heading westward. That's all a bit iffy because it's going to take them a long time to get into a useful position, but there we go. And just in case Sharbite observers are worrying about it, I have what did I want to mention? I wanted to mention that these chaps have had a great deal of luck in finding their causeways across the Nebelbach. It's been very rare that they've been penalized by becoming disordered for crossing the marshy stream. And I've made sure that to take into account that if a unit with dedicated guns is disordered crossing a marshy stream, they will lose their dedicated guns. I've made sure that has not happened to anyone, but I am taking that into account. So that's what's going on, and there's a lot of decisions have been made there by the Allied commander, bold decisions, I think, and we shall see if they were the right ones as we now get into morale and combat. Okay, here we are at the end of the combat of the end of the turn, of Anglo-Allied turn 6, and things didn't go as well as they would have wished in the centre. Bit of a mixed bag. Let's see, everybody passed their morale test apart from these chaps up here. So who have we got there? They are Maffei's troops. I suppose that would be Tattenbach. Obviously in German it would be Tattenbach. And they failed the morale test, so they are disordered. So that means that, what does it mean? It means that in their turn they can recover from disorder, but they won't be stationary. Their comrades to the left here can become stationary, but they won't enjoy such a privilege. They were fired upon by the ragged-looking artillery there, which is permanently disordered, and it was desultory fire to no effect. However, down here, de Soffry did indeed take a hit from, extremely unlikely as it was, they took a hit from these chaps here, Anhalt Dessau's Anhalt Dessau unit, which actually the same name as the division name. Of course, when they're firing, they're permanently disordered, and of course they're in a forest. So the jolly old French there get 2 lots of saving throws, but even so, one of them managed to get through. So they've chipped away there at de Soffry, another casualty on a division which needs to be exhausted. Okay, and then beyond that, let's see. I've got to check something on my camera. I've got a message appearing on the screen. One moment. There we go. We're back and broadcasting. Right. Okay. So that's what happened there. And that's what happened here and here I just described. Yes. So, of course, the main event was in the center. And for the first time, we had in the combat that took place here against these chaps here, which was Ostfries, which, remember, they've only got one more hit before they become exhausted, and plucky chaps that they were, they decided to have a go at these chaps here to try and finally exhaust Dacaux's division. So they attacked Wolframsdorf, Wolframsdorf 1, as I'm calling them. They attacked them, and they were disordered and not only that, my dear chaps and chapesses, not only that, but in the attack on them, the attack from these chaps here, yes, they're all the way back there, they were attacking them, they were disordered, so they had cavalry shock, because they're not firearm trained cavalry, and they have cavalry shock. So, I mean, give me a break. Cavalry shock against a disordered enemy, right? I mean, not only, what I mean by that is cavalry shock means you hit on 5s and 6s. They're throwing 4 dice, for heaven's sake, hitting on 5s and 6s, and their enemy is disordered. So all the hits coming in from them are going to get saving throws. Well, in all the dice that was thrown, no one hit anything. Astonishing. I mean, it's not, 1,000,000 to 1, but it seemed unlikely. And then, of course, there was a melee tie, and wouldn't you know it, Ostfries lost the melee tie. So they're back there. They retreated, disordered. Nobody lost any men. And there we go. So that's what happened there. So they held their own, plucky chaps, give them their due. Down here, we had Württemberg Tech's division got involved for the first time, and they ganged up, 2 units ganged up, of course, against Zurlauben's cavalry brigade here under Brolier. And as we can see, there's no trace of them. The slaughter was unspeakable, and they are gone. Yes, they've gone to the stables in the sky, as it were. Right, so that's what happened there. And then over here we had, let's read his name. Was it Silly Grignon, something like that, belonging to Daumier's division. And they saw off Lumley's, the brigade under Woods, belonging to Lumley's division. They saw them off. They both took a hit, but they lost the melee tie. A lot of melee ties going on. So they've both taken a hit, and they went back to there. And then these chaps decided to take advantage of advance after combat. So they advanced after combat to occupy the position previously occupied by the enemy, and they have changed their facing. And they're now, of course, in a perfect situation, because it's the French turn next, to hit them not only with 2 units, but also with a flank attack. Ooh, ouch. And of course, if they do that, there's a decent chance that they might be disordered before the melee starts. Ouch. And then, of course, if they break, if they simply lose the melee and have to retreat, they will become disordered. And if they rout instead, well, they will become disordered. And of course, if they can rout them, then that means that these chaps here would be able to elect to do a cavalry breakthrough onto these chaps here, who would be disordered, as we've just established, and whack them in the flank as well. I mean, woof. So this could be the ruination of Württemberg Tech's division. And of course, if things really get bad, if we go into the dark places, the worst that could happen, of course, is that his division could not only be exhausted, it could be collapsed as well. So remember, they've got 6 points on their victory list at the moment, the French Bavarians. So if they were able to pull that off, that would be another 2 points if they can collapse the division as well, which could be possible. Yes, so costly business, Now, on the plus side, they are getting whittled down. I think Zurlauben right now, I believe he's 1 hit away from exhaustion. Of course, he belongs to Talar, so nowhere near as important as what's going on over here, of course. But at least if they were exhausted, they couldn't attack anyone anymore. And I'm pretty sure that Brolier as well is only 1 hit away from exhaustion. We can see his units here, and they've both taken a hit. So I believe one more will exhaust them. And then over there, on the plus side for the Allies, we've got, I'm sure all veteran Volley and Bayonet players will know this sort of thing. But Lumley, for example, was positioned back here so that in anticipation that if his men had to do a retreat move back to here, the key thing is that they would be in command in the next turn. He's not way down here, which would have left them out of command. Okay, so yeah, there we go. So that means that if they do a flank attack here at them, okay, and then especially if they do a cavalry breakthrough, which means that they would become permanently disordered, remember. So I suppose that's sort of like the cavalry being blown, I think the term is, where, the horses are exhausted and all that sort of thing. As far as I know, I'm not an expert in these matters. But they would be there, and they would be a very tempting target then for Lumley which, I mean, these chaps are in perfectly decent condition. Yes, they've taken a hit, okay. But there are only two of them, aren't there? Yes, there are. That's the entire division right there. But they, in their turn then, could charge and hit Dumier, who would be here disordered. Yes. But again, that's just whittling down Talar, which is not the big picture right now. The big picture is to finally exhaust all of Massin's divisions. And that now, all of a sudden, is very difficult once again, because unless these chaps can survive this mess here, it's very difficult once again because, of course, these chaps wisely chose not to occupy the position that was occupied by the enemy, and that means that all of Darko's forces, or Darko, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, it's either Darko or Darko, all of his forces are, of course, south of the Maulmeyer? Yes. Which just means it's more difficult to get at them. Right, okay. So all very exciting stuff. And of course I say here's to it. So now we're on to off to French turn 6.